My name is Dana Atwood, and I am 58 years old. At my son's wedding reception, the one I paid $47,000 for, my new daughter-in-law raised her glass, looked me dead in the eye, and told 200 guests, "The best wedding gift would be you leaving this family for good." The guests gasped. The string quartet lost its place. My son studied his shoes. I set down my champagne, walked out to the terrace, and made one phone call. What happened in the next 15 minutes, and in the 10 days after, is why that bride wishes she had chosen her words more carefully. But first, you should know what my silence had been paying for 9 long years. Because my family never asked where the money came from. They only ever asked when the next check was coming. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women tell you how they finally stopped being quiet. We share stories about family, money, and the exact moment enough becomes enough. If you have ever been the mother who pays for everything and still gets erased from the photograph, this one is for you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe, because you are going to want to hear how this wedding ended. 9 years ago, my husband Peter collapsed on a bridge inspection site outside Columbus. A stroke. He was 52. I was 49, and our son Cole was 23, 3 weeks out of college with a marketing degree and a car payment. People ask how I got through that first year. The honest answer is paperwork. Grief has paperwork, and I was good at paperwork. I had spent 20 years building an accounting firm out of our kitchen, 9 employees by then, half the small businesses in town on my client list. So when the hospital sent its bills, I filed them. When the insurance company stalled, I called them every morning at 9 until they stopped stalling. When the funeral home quoted me a casket package with a straight face, I asked for the itemized version, and the price dropped $1,100 on the spot. Numbers held still for me when nothing else would. Peter used to tease me about it. He said I loved a balanced ledger the way other women loved fresh flowers. He wasn't wrong. But here is what I didn't see back then, standing in that quiet house with a stack of folders where a marriage used to be. When the person you talk to is gone, you start talking in the only language you have left. Mine was money. Cole would call, and I would hear his father's laugh buried in his voice, and whatever he needed, the answer was already yes, before he finished the sentence. The first check I wrote for my son was 3 days after his father's funeral, $1,800, for his rent. It was not the last. It was not even close to the last, and that is the part I have to own. Here is something you should know about Cole. My son is easy to love. Waiters remember him. Old ladies at church saved him cookies. He can walk into a room of strangers and leave with 3 golf invitations, and he means every handshake. That part is Peter, through and through. But Cole never once asked me for money. He mentioned, "There is a difference," and it took me years to hear it. He would call on a Sunday, and we would talk about the Browns game, and somewhere around minute 20 he'd say, "The transmission guy quoted me $1,200? Can you believe that?" And he would sigh and change the subject, and by Tuesday, the money would be sitting in his account because I had sent it. He never had to lower himself to asking. I never got the dignity of being asked. The transfer just happened, quiet as a thermostat, and we both pretended the house warmed itself. At the office, I was famous for one speech. I'd sit a client down, some sweet overextended couple, and say, "If you can't write it in the ledger where you can see it, it's not generosity, it's a leak." Every February I gave that speech a dozen times. Then I would drive home and wire my son $400 for a golf weekend he'd mentioned. I balanced books for half the town, and there was one column I never once totaled, because I knew what the number would do to me. The mentions got bigger, that's all. Slowly, politely, the way water rises. And then, one Thursday in October, 6 years ago, my phone rang, and it was a debt counselor from Cole's bank, and my son's voice in the background, and nobody was mentioning anymore. $41,500. That was the whole. Once I got all the statements on one table, 5 credit cards and the balance on a truck he should never have financed. Cole was 26, sitting in my kitchen with his ears red, and I remember thinking he looked exactly like he did at 9 when he'd batted a baseball through the Hendersons' window. I paid it, all of it, the following Monday. But I did one thing that surprised him, and I did it because of a sentence Peter used to say when clients wanted handshake deals. Paper keeps love clean. I drew up a promissory note, a demand note, the kind any lender can call due whenever she chooses. Principal, $41,500. Interest pegged to the federal rate, which is what the IRS expects if you don't want a loan reclassified as a gift. Payable on demand to Dana Atwood. I am a CPA. If I am going to love somebody with money, the file is going to be immaculate. Cole signed it at this same kitchen table without reading past the second line. He grinned and said, "Sure, Mom, invoice me." And we ordered a pizza. And that was that. Every December after, I forgave that year's interest with a one-line letter, the way the gift rules allow, and I filed each letter in a folder he never knew existed. He never made a payment on the principal. I never asked for one. For 6 years, both of those facts felt like love. It would take a wedding to teach me what they actually were, and to teach my son that a demand note is named for exactly what it sounds like. The house came a year later. Cole was 27 by then, and the debt mess had wrecked his credit. No bank in Ohio was writing him a mortgage, and his rent downtown was eating him alive. That spring, an estate sale put a brick colonial on Maple Street on the market. 3 bedrooms. A maple in the yard the size of a courthouse. 15 minutes from my townhouse. $315,000. I had it. That is not bragging. It is arithmetic. 28 years of 12-hour days, a paid-off building, and a life insurance payout I had never spent. I had it, and I bought the house outright, with my own name on the deed. And I want to be clear about this part, because it matters later. Keeping the title was not an accident, and it was not stinginess. I had just watched my son dig a $41,000 hole with a shovel called optimism. So I sat him down and said it plainly. This is my house. You live in it. You pay me rent. And someday, when the ground under you is solid, we will talk about the deed like adults. $850 a month. Market rate on that street was $2,200, and we both knew it. Cole hugged me, called it mom rent, and moved in that fall, 5 years ago. My friends at church thought I was a saint. My sister Gail thought I was a fool. They were both wrong. But I'll get to that. Because what nobody knew, not Cole, not Gail, not anyone, was what I did with that $850, the first Monday of every single month. Every rent payment Cole ever made went into an account he has never heard of. I opened it the week he moved in, at the same branch where I'd banked since Reagan. Every month his $850 landed in my checking, and every month I moved it straight across, untouched, into that quiet little account with his name written on the file tab in my desk. He thought he was paying me. He was paying himself. He just didn't know it yet. I used to sit with my coffee on the first Monday of the month and watch the balance tick up, and let myself imagine the day I'd hand it over. A wedding, maybe. A grandchild. Some ordinary Tuesday when he finally asked me how I was doing before he asked me for anything. 60 months. $850 at a time. $51,000, sitting there like a present wrapped so far in advance you forget which closet you hid it in. Gail says I was building him a safety net. That's generous. The truth has harder edges. I think I was building proof. A number I could point to someday that said, "See, she loved you the whole time. It was all right here in writing." As if love were a thing you could escrow. As if my son would someday audit me and I wanted to pass. I know how that sounds. I knew it then too, and I kept depositing anyway, because it was the only sentence in our language I still knew how to say. Then one Sunday in April, 3 years ago, Cole called me, and his voice had a shine on it I hadn't heard since before his father died. "Mom," he said, "I met someone." Her name was Madison Whitmore, and the first time she walked into my house, she complimented the crown molding before she complimented me. She was 26 then, an event coordinator, Pretty the way a catalog is pretty. Everything ironed, everything placed. She brought a bottle of wine with a ribbon on it and said my home was so charming, so lived in, and I set the table and told myself that nerves make young women sound like realtors. I wanted to like her. I want that on the record. I asked about her family, and she gave me the Whitmores in one polished paragraph. Her father in furniture, her mother Sandra on every charity committee in the county. A paragraph so smooth it had clearly been vacuumed, but her eyes worked the whole dinner. They moved along my bookshelves, my china cabinet, the photographs on the mantel, not the way a guest looks, the way an appraiser looks. She priced the room. I watched her do it between the salad and the roast, and I remember the exact feeling, like hearing one wrong note in a hymn you've sung your whole life. Then she lifted her glass, tilted it toward my son, and said, smiling, "To self-made men." And Cole, my Cole, sitting in a house I owned, driving on tires I had mentioned into existence that February. Cole raised his glass and said not one correcting word. My son toasted the man he had invented, and drank. I laughed along, because that is what mothers do at nice dinners. But I drove my fork through that roast and thought, one of the 3 people at this table is a fiction, and I appear to be the only one who isn't voting for him. 2 springs ago, Cole proposed on a dock at sunset, and the Whitmores threw an engagement party with a champagne tower and a photographer who kept saying, "Candid, candid," while arranging everyone by height. I stood where I was placed. Sandra Whitmore worked that patio like a woman running for office, her voice pitched to Carrie. "We just adore Cole. He fits this family like he was made for it." Made for it. I filed the phrasing away with the rest of my collection. Gail, my little sister, appeared at my elbow with 2 glasses and her retired school teacher whisper that carries 30 feet. "You know their furniture stores went under, right? Marie from my bridge club says the bank took the Lakeside house in 2009 and Sandra told everybody they were simplifying." I told her to hush. But I had heard the same story twice already, and pieces of it clicked against things I'd noticed. The leased Audi, the country club they belonged to but never ate at. A family keeping up a front is its own kind of tired, and I know what tired looks like. What unsettled me that night wasn't the Whitmores, though. It was my son's pronouns. All evening, we think fall weddings are overdone. We're leaning toward a vineyard. We feel strongly about a live quartet. Every we had Madison inside it, and none of them had me. A mother notices the day she is moved from the inside of a sentence to the outside. I smiled through it. I have a good reception smile. You'll see it again at an actual reception. The wedding, everyone agreed, would be beautiful. Nobody asked, out loud, who would be paying for it. That question, like every expensive question in my family, had already been quietly assigned. The wedding bills never came to me directly. They arrived sideways, the family specialty. Cole would call on a Sunday. We'd do the Browns, and then, "So, Stonebrook Vineyard needs the deposit by Friday. 12,000. Venues are insane, right?" A sigh. A pause shaped exactly like my checkbook. I want to tell you I hesitated, but we'd been running this play for 9 years, and muscle memory is a powerful thing. I wired the 12,000 on Wednesday. Then came the caterer, the florist, the quartet Madison felt strongly about, the photographer with the drone, the cake lady who charged by the sugar flour. By the week of the wedding, the total out of my accounts was $47,000, and I could show you the ledger, because of course I kept one. Every invoice tabbed, every confirmation stapled, force of habit and, if I'm honest, force of something sadder. Here is the part that stung. I was paying for a party I was learning about secondhand. There was a wedding group chat. I was not in it. Decisions arrived to me as announcements. The colors are sage and cream, the ceremony's at 5, the menu's plated, not buffet. And a year into the engagement, months before the wedding, Sandra Whitmore hosted a brunch where she clinked a spoon on a mimosa glass and told 40 people how thrilled she was to be hosting this wedding for our 2 families. Hosting. I had wired her florist that morning. I sat there with my eggs going cold and did what I always did. The math. silently, alone. Then the invitations came back from the printer. Heavy cream cardstock. Lovely. I found my name on the guest list, just not anywhere above it where the hosts' names go. 3 weeks out, Gail texted me a link with 5 exclamation points. The wedding website. There was a page called Our Story, written in Madison's voice, and I read it standing at my kitchen counter with my reading glasses on, and then I read it again, sitting down. It told the story of a self-made man, Cole Atwood, who hustled his way through his 20s, who was debt-free and driven, who bought his first home before 30. A photo of the Maple Street house sat right under that line, my maple tree glowing gold in the corner of the frame. My house. On the internet. As evidence of a man I had personally invented $41,500 ago. I did not simmer quietly, whatever you may be assuming about women my age. I called my son that night and told him the website needed to come down or come clean, and that a marriage built on a resume was a building code violation. And I said the harder thing. Madison needs to know, Cole. About the house. About the loan. Before the wedding, not after. You do not let that girl sign up for a man who doesn't exist. There was a long quiet on the line, and then my son said, in the gentle voice he uses on difficult clients, "She knows, Mom. She knows everything. She just doesn't like talking about money. Her family's weird about it. Trust me. Please don't make this a thing." I have replayed that sentence more times than I can say. If you've ever sat on a truth to keep a family photo smiling, tell me in the comments how long you held yours. I held mine 3 more weeks, on my own son's word. And be sure you're subscribed, because you are about to watch exactly what that cost. 2 weeks before the wedding, the Whitmores had us to dinner, and I finally saw the inside of the house Sandra called the cottage. It was beautiful the way a showroom is beautiful right before the liquidation sale. Good bones, staged rooms, and if you looked twice, the pale rectangles on the wallpaper where paintings used to hang. Nobody mentions rectangles like that. I went looking for the powder room and took a wrong turn into the back hall, and that is where I heard them, Sandra and Madison, in the kitchen with the water running. Sandra's voice had lost the committee luncheon sheen. It was low and hard, a voice with beams showing. You keep your face on Saturday, and you keep it on after. We don't owe anyone anything anymore. Remember that. And Madison answered, and I would not have known her. Small. Young. A girl reciting something she'd been drilled on. I know, Mom. I remember. I stood in that hallway with my hand on the wainscoting, and I did the thing I do. I put numbers where the fog was. The store's gone in 2009. The house on Lakeside taken. Tuition. Gone with it. She'd finished at the state school on loans nobody spoke of. That family hadn't lost money. They'd been publicly amputated, and Sandra had spent 15 years teaching her daughter that owing anyone anything is how you bleed to death. Every debt is a leash. Every giver eventually pulls. I felt sorry for Madison Whitmore for exactly one hallway. It complicated nothing and explained everything. Then I came back into the dining room and she looked up at me, swift and automatic, and priced my coat. Understanding a snake's childhood, it turns out, does not thin the venom. It just tells you where she'll bite. The demotions were small, and they came like a drip line. First, the toast. I'd asked for 3 minutes at the reception. Mother of the groom. A few words. The kind of thing that happens at every wedding since weddings began. Madison called me herself. All warmth. The timeline's just so tight, Dana. The planner says toasts are where receptions go to die. You understand. The maid of honor kept her toast. Sandra kept hers. Mine died in committee. Then the seating chart leaked through Gail, who plays bridge with the planner's aunt. A head table for the wedding party, a family table for the Whitmores, and me at table 9. I looked it up on the floor plan I had, after all, paid for. Table 9 sat by the kitchen doors. Then came the program proof, and under "Hosted by," it said the Whitmore family in italics, and my name appeared nowhere on a piece of cardstock my own florist invoice was subsidizing. I want to be precise about what I did, because it matters for what came later. I did not sulk, and I did not explode. I called Cole and asked one plain question. Is this what you want or what you're avoiding? He gave me the client voice again. It's just details, Mom. It's her day. You're bigger than a seating chart. And I paid the florist's final $6,400 that same afternoon, because in my office, the person who signs is the person who decides. Weddings, apparently, run on a different accounting, one where the signature and the say-so are kept in separate rooms. I remember thinking the girl was working awfully hard to make one grandmother-aged woman invisible. What I couldn't figure out yet was why my visibility frightened her so much. 10 days before the wedding, Cole came by alone, which almost never happened anymore. He sat at my kitchen table, the one with his signature in a folder upstairs, and he circled the runway for 20 minutes. The Browns draft picks, my tomatoes. Whether I'd ever thought about a cruise? I poured coffee and waited him out. I've sat across from nervous clients for 30 years, and the ones circling longest are always carrying the biggest ask. Finally, he landed it. So, Madison and I were talking, and the house. We were thinking, with the wedding, it'd mean a lot if you signed it over, to both of us, as the wedding gift. He said it fast, like a man pulling tape off skin, and then he added the sentence that told me whose sentence it was. It's basically ours anyway, Mom. I set my cup down. Basically, I said. I let the word sit between us the way I'd let a client's bad number sit on a desk. Not cruel, just visible. Here is what I heard, and I want you to hear it too. Not greed, exactly. A script.